Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well,
Good.
Looking forward to another program and
With
see
good
if we
news.
Can, yeah, we got a few today.
Finally.
At least good news is just moving in our direction,
Yes.
you know. But that's also very important. You know, momentum is a big deal. So maybe the momentum against us has settled down a little bit. They locked up everybody. They didn't have anybody else to lock up. Now the people who got locked up are fighting back. So we want to talk a little bit about that because I think that's what's going to break the back of the people who want to control us totally.
Yeah.
People are speaking out around the world now. Get rid of the lockdowns and this sort of thing. So, and this is what we've been complaining of course, too, is that the lockdown was so vicious and unfair.
Yeah.
You know, they pretended that they knew who was most important. We could keep them open and all that nonsense, as if you could divvy up rights and give a little bit here, and buy some here. And I think the people are tired of it.
Yeah.
And we haven't had a whole lot from the officials. The governors who have been imposing this have gotten all the attention.
Yeah.
But we had a governor friend in South Dakota that knew what she was doing. So it's out there. Our side is not dead and gone. But yesterday, I think the ruling came down in a federal court in Pittsburgh, ruling on the constitutionality of the lockdown laws of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And boy, I think the statement there from the judge is fantastic.
Terrific, yeah.
He actually, correctly, used the Constitution.
Yeah.
You know, his big beef for the basic thing is he says it was against the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment, and of course it's against the principles of America.
Yeah.
The whole thing. So this was very good, and of course the Democratic governor. He's not happy today, and they're going to appeal, and they're trying to get a stay now. But one of the things I think I remember this correctly. I thought was the greatest from the judges is that so much is done in Congress. Well, but we want to help the poor.
Yeah.
We want to do this. And the excuse here is we want to keep you safe. We want to get rid of this virus. And the judge was very explicit. Good intentions. It's not enough. Not enough. And that's so he's giving them a pass and saying it's all bad. Maybe I don't know what he calls it, but he doesn't say they intentionally. The people did it intentionally. They were probably well motivated. And it is true. There's so much garbage that goes on in Washington. The people who are dealing with it, because I got to know them, I just didn't see them as evil people.
Yeah.
It was the orchestrators of these policies that are the evil people. And I have more complain about our university system and how they get indoctrinated there. But anyway, it was a great ruling. It came out late yesterday, and there's a few people talking about it today. So I'm delighted that it's been called attention to, and we're going to do our best to try to spread the message that this is the way they need to move, because there's some other states that are in the middle of this and trying to change their laws. So this hopefully would have an effect on other people who are looking for some help to get rid of these lockdowns.
Yeah, it doesn't set a precedent, but it certainly will advise other federal judges. Well, this is U.S. District Court Judge William Stickman from the Western District of Pennsylvania, and his ruling really sent a shockwave, certainly through Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania authorities were arguing that the restrictions were a legitimate exercise of the state's powers. The judge ruled that the stay-at-home order, the limits on outdoor gatherings, were, quote, until further notice, were far too broad, violating the First Amendment guarantee of freedom of assembly, and that closing businesses violated the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause, which means which says that we should have impartial judgment. What they did is shut down all of the mom and pop stores, but then left the Walmarts open that were selling the exact same types of products. So picking and choosing and punishing some businesses more than others was ruled unconstitutional. We do have it from an authority on the Constitution, by the way, that we want to bring in here, not live, of course, but our old friend and expert Judge Napolitano was on this morning on Fox, and he was really excited. So we want to play a few seconds of his reaction if we can.
Right. This is it's about time ruling in which a federal judge, this is the first federal judge in the country who said, just because there is a pandemic and a health emergency doesn't give the state dictatorial powers, and the Constitution still prevails. So what does this mean? In Pennsylvania, the governor cannot decide what work is essential and what work is not essential. The governor cannot decide how many people can enter a church or enter a Walmart or enter a car dealership or enter a furniture store. These are choices for individuals to make on their own. Thank goodness we finally had.
Not only did he sound exciting and excited about all this, I think he was ecstatic over what was happening. He was so pleased, and he has worked with a lot of people that totally disagree with him all the time about the Constitution. You know, it's so rarely that we get something like that. So I think it was great that they put him on today to make this point, but there's still a lot of enemies out there to try to convince that the Constitution is important under these circumstances.
Well, you mentioned some great quotes from the ruling. Let's put up a couple of pictures. Let's start from the beginning and just kind of, here's just the headlines. Let's do the next one and then go to the third one and we'll read a little bit of it if we can. There's the poor old governor. He's so sad. Here's what the Judge Stickman, this is great. The liberties protected by the Constitution are not fair weather freedoms, in place when times are good, but able to be cast aside in times of trouble. There is no question that this country has faced and will face emergencies of every sort. But the solution to a national crisis can never be permitted to supersede the commitment to individual liberty that stands as the foundation of the American experiment. Wow, carved that in stone, right?
Yeah, and he makes the point by just looking at the Constitution, what rights are all about and where they come from. But, you know, when you go to the governor, what does he say? What is his justification? Well, I'm protecting the public good.
Yeah.
Everything annoying means any more than that. The public. Who's the public? It's what the governor says is the public.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why it's so bad because it contradicts every principle about individual liberty. So he talks about the public good. The Constitution talks about individual liberty. And when the people with this intent to protect the public, they do it at the expense of individual liberty, and that's where the clash is. But the American people have been too tolerant for too long, and maybe the lockdown will be a wake-up call. You know, there's a few people getting annoyed, whether it's the school system or going to church or whatever, going shopping or going out to restaurants.
Yeah.
You know, this idea, well, we are so smart that this restaurant can open, everybody can open up, but we have the rules. You can have 25 people come to your restaurant. You can have 50 people come to your. What kind of nonsense is that? That is such an insult. That's why just capitulating and bowing to these ridiculous regulations, I think they want you to, you know, maybe soften a little bit, just get you in the habit, which is the whole thing. That was the whole thing of TSA. Get you in the habit of getting poked around and doing exactly as they tell us to do, and this is and then it becomes acceptable. So unfortunately, it's been around too long, but we're hoping that you know, announcements like this and rulings like this will wake up more people, and they could feel more encouraged to speak out.
Well, you remember that tragic story we talked about a few months ago about these restaurants on the Virginia-Tennessee state line, I think it was. And on one side where they had lockdown and the other side they didn't, literally on the street. On one side of the street, the restaurants were open and doing businesses. On the other side, they were struggling and almost out of business. So that's just the arbitrariness of it. But you know, the Pennsylvania governor's spokesman is striking back. Lindsey Kinzinger, unhappy about the ruling. The spokesman said the actions taken by the administration were mirrored by governors across the country and saved and continue to save lives in the absence of federal action. Well, that's up for debate, isn't it? Because the states that locked down the hardest, New York, Pennsylvania, they had the highest level of deaths, including the highest level of deaths in the nursing homes. Remember old Rachel Levine, the health, whatever she is, of Pennsylvania, she pulled her own mother out of one of these rest homes right before the governor issued orders that sick people should be moved into the homes, and I think over 40% of the dead in Pennsylvania are from a direct result of the governor moving these sick people back into the homes. So no, they didn't, A, and B, not all governors did that. We talked about South Dakota. She didn't do that. There were reasons. Basically, the excuse that the governor of Pennsylvania said, well, everyone else did it. Why should we get blamed for it, you know?
Well, I think with this, it helps to develop the debate, the political debate. It's been political, but it's been superficial and not intellectual enough. Now I think it's getting down to the nitty-gritty. Is this constitutional? Now that the people aren't as quite terrified as they want the people to be, and they are saying, well, maybe we don't need this. And this is what's happening. People are waking up, and they're not nearly as frightened as they were. But this will be something that I think will come up in the in the election this year. I think the Senate is controlled by the Republicans, in Pennsylvania, and they're really now, because they've been against these regulations that the Democratic governor has put on there.
Yeah.
So this is going to give them a lot of ammunition, and it will be political, even though the opposition doesn't give up easily. We'll be back.
Yeah.
This doesn't prohibit them from coming back and doing whatever. It's not the law of the land yet, but the laws are usually developed after the people make up their mind, that we'll get rid of lockdown when the people get tired of lockdown, when they think it's too much of a cost and too much trouble and too much loss of liberty, and that's when we'll get rid of it.
Yeah, well, there are plenty of mealy-mouthed Republican lawmakers who, put their fingers to the wind. And hopefully this will embolden some of them. We got a few of them in Texas, by the way, unfortunately. But I looked at this and I was thinking about it. I'm sure you did. You were doing the same thing. Probably view it as a partial victory because yes, the First and 14th Amendments were cited and very well cited. But there's the downside that other judges may not follow. This judge was a Trump appointee, so there's that political component. It doesn't affect other things that were in place, the mandatory work from home orders, the mask orders, and these sorts of things. So it's not a complete victory. However, as a symbolic victory and as something to get the ball rolling, it's positive. The other thing that came out in this, and I think really deserves to come out a lot more, is a revisiting this whole idea of emergency powers that governors have been granted by legislatures to some degree. These need to be revisited, I think, across the country. First of all, way too broad. And in Texas as well, and in Pennsylvania, it was ruled too broad. It just goes, I can just keep continuing to keep doing it as long as I want. But the thing is, a lot of these laws, I think the Texas law, correct me if I'm wrong, was passed in 1975. Dealing with a disaster in 1975 is very different from dealing with a disaster in 2020. We have internet. We have other ways of communicating. You can imagine back then it was much more difficult for things to take place when, say, there's a big fire or a flood or something. But it's not the same now. So these, I think, need to be revisited and changed.
Well, these emergency powers and what's on the books has got my attention for a long time. And I think it was in the 70s when they brought everything together and redefined them and tried to put in some controls. But literally, the interpretation that was made back in the 70s is the president has the authority without any more congressional activity to become a dictator.
Yeah.
He can close down anything he wants. So in a way, the people have granted this power. It wasn't like somebody stood up and I'm going to be the dictator and this is what I want. The Congress and the people went along with this because, it was the Cold War and other things you had to be prepared for. And who knows, there's going to be an epidemic, but we still have to wake up people. And I think the biggest challenge we have is let's say we don't want to go to war against Iraq, and the Iraq war is to protect our national security. Oh, that means you're against national security.
Yeah.
You have to, or like, we don't believe in, the food stamp principle. Oh, you want people to starve to death. No, it's the opposite, because people are now hungrier than ever, and national security isn't protected. So this is the biggest job we have. So if we're not for all this activity, Well, it's already gone out there because they think Trump is murdering people. I
Yeah.
mean, they use those terms,
Yeah.
and he should be charged with murder because he hasn't been tough enough on this thing. And that's the thing that we have to do as libertarians, is that when you say turn it over to the people and to the individual, what might happen? Oh, it'll be a disaster. Well, it might be better, and maybe what we have is a disaster.
Yeah.
We turn the monetary system and the spending of the country over to the politicians, and look at where it's gotten us. There is another point that I wanted to make. About the Harris County.
Yeah.
The Harris County. All of a sudden, they discovered that maybe something we were saying was exactly right.
Yeah.
They got caught, and I think that's very good. They were misinformation, and this will be a revelation to some people, but it was gross misinterpretation of what they were doing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. If we can bring up the next clip, it's gotten so bad that even the New York Times has had to notice what's happening in Texas. And as someone quipped, when the New York Times says you're overstating cases, you're probably overstating cases. This is a piece in the New York Times. Of course, they frame it a little differently than we would, Dr. Paul. Conflicting virus data in Texas raises distrust in the government. Well, that sounds like a good thing, but of course they presented it as a bad thing. But what has happened, Dr. Paul, is that the state overlooked hundreds and thousands of positive test results. They call them cases. We call them positive test results from as far back as June and July. And then they dropped them into the system in August and especially in September, reporting them months later. There's no way that you can accurately make public policy with such distorted information. And of course, the New York Times just says it undermines confidence. Here are a couple of examples of what happened. Dallas County reported 5,361 cases one day in mid-August, but the actual positive tests of that day, 166. So reporting 5,300, actual was 166. So how does that distort your policy making? Harris County reported 636 deaths on July 26th and then 1,100 on July 27th. But during that actual 24-hour period, only 10 people died. So when you have this huge spike, Harris County got to shut it down. Lena Hidalgo is running around with her hair on fire. The reality is only 10 people, not 1,100 people died. And this is repeated throughout the state of Texas. And it really raises the question whether the second wave in Texas was a total fraud.
And they've made some corrections now on reporting, and we can see the charts. All of a sudden, they have changed. But they're making the corrections because they were caught at what they're doing for whatever reason. Whether it's a total ineptness or for a contrived reason to do it. To manipulate things. It doesn't matter. It happened, and they had to change because they got caught at it. And this I think I often wonder that people get caught. We live in an age where everything has to, if anybody does anything wrong and it's sort of contrived, do you apologize? A public apology.
Yeah.
Something like this, I don't buy into that stuff that you have to bend over and apologize when somebody else decides whether you're really sorry.
Yeah.
But people like this that have messed up on this and caused so much harm. Do they ever say, I really made a mistake? We met about one or two like that in Washington. They never make mistakes.
Yeah.
And besides, they're trying, no matter, you may be right, but think of the monster that the president is. We have to do anything we can to destroy the president because we have a guy on our side that is really super good.
Yeah, and they all end up being the same. Well, on this, we can even look at the next clip. This was building for weeks now. Bloomberg, to its credit, has covered this pretty well. If we can look at that, this is from Houston Republic. Bloomberg report: Harris County's COVID-19 numbers out of date. The more than 82% of the cases reported last week in Texas were from before September. 82% of the cases reported were before September. The hospitalization, this is Alex Rodriguez, who we've talked about on the show before, does a terrific job on Twitter. More than 80, he talks about the only reliable way of counting what's happening, because the numbers are so distorted, is hospitalizations. Because that is something that is, And then he says that hospitalizations are down 70% since July, since late July. So that really is the most important thing. But let's look, you mentioned they fixed it yesterday. Yesterday, the Texas Department of Health Services announced, okay, you got us. We're going to change our whole system again, and now we're only going to report cases reported on that day rather than resurrecting legacy cases from May. And let's put up this clip, and I don't know if we can expand it so it's a little easier to read. If we can make it any bigger, that would be helpful. But here's the new chart from the Texas services. That yellow line that goes up and then comes neatly down, that is what it is. And what does that mean? That means that the actual positivity rate for Texas, specimen collection date, 6.71% positivity. Remember what Governor Abbott said, if we get below 10, we're going to be able to reopen it again. We've been below 10 for a long time, but they were messing things up. And now when you look at it, you look at that yellow line, and you look at where it is now, and you look at we're way, way back below May in our positivity, in our cases. That says everything.
You know, he mentions that you should look at the hospitalization. People come, and when they come in the emergency room or are admitted, you always put down the admitting diagnosis.
Yeah.
And that will tend to be more objective than death certificates, because they come in and they say, you know, they're positive and they're sick and they have all the symptoms and they make their case for them. And I think emphasizing hospitalization in sick people, because most people don't die, and then you have the death certificates have all been, that's been manipulated too. You know, if you get in a motorcycle accident and you're positive, COVID did it to them.
Yeah.
So no, I think that's better. And I think this is important because everybody goes by these statistics, which are important. In medicine, it is important to know what's happening. But then when you get to the point where you can't even trust the people who are giving us the information, then you end up with this. So they have ulterior motives. And there certainly were some people who had ulterior motives, whether it's every single person that participates in this fraud. But it's great that they changed their tune rather quickly. They knew they got caught.
They did. Well, I'm just going to close by reminding our viewers to please make sure you subscribed and you have your notifications ticked on this site. We're getting close to 250,000 subscribers, and we're very happy with that. We work hard to try to build that up. We want you to subscribe and watch the show. Please tell your friends and your neighbors to also subscribe. And also visit us on ronpaulinstitute.org, where we put up a lot of articles every day that are specially chosen to help give you the big picture about what's going on. And while you're there, if you might want to support us with a tax-deductible donation, we'll be happy to have it. And I'll just close with one final thing, Dr. Paul. We are anxiously awaiting the arrival of a new mini-book from Dr. Paul. I don't want to spill the beans here, but watch this space because it's going to be something that is really exciting and really interesting. So, Dr. Paul?
Very good. I have just a couple little points I'm going to make. The headlines in the Fact, which is our local Lake Jackson newspaper, I thought, look at the headlines. This looks pretty good. School district seeing only a handful of COVID cases. Maybe they've gotten the word, you know. So it's a good news. But the school system, because we do have members of the family that are very much involved in the school district. We have a lot of kids going to school there, and it's total chaos. I mean, you could, if you have 3 or 4 kids, you might be going to 2 different schools on Tuesday and Thursdays, and then the rest of the time you have to go do it at home, and half of them don't know what to do. I asked one of the member of the family that's a teacher, I said, overall, not that I didn't know the answer, but I said, overall, how do you compare the kids that get to come and be in your classroom, even with some of these regulations, versus the ones that are staying at home? And there is no question, those kids that are doing it at home are having a real handicap. That doesn't mean they're all going to, but I think overall that is the case. The other little item here today was the announcement that the House came to an agreement on how to divvy up $1.5 trillion. You know, they pass so much money. It's ironic. They pass it, it's sitting there. Then they don't know what to do with it. It's taken all this time. And the reason that they finally got motivated to find out where this money's going is they want more. It's just amazing. 1.25 million. So it's a coalition. It's a coalition of Republicans and Democrats. I mean, that's what we want. We want moderates coming together to get things done. But that's not good news. Let me tell you, that's not good news, because next week they're going to pass another $1 trillion for stimulus, because there's still a lot of people suffering from the lockdown. And since it's found now that the government was responsible for that lockdown, aren't they responsible for helping the people? It's on and on. But anyway, these problems shouldn't be that difficult. They're made difficult not because we're following the principles of freedom in our Constitution. We're following the principles of a bunch of crony capitalists and politicians who are motivated to feather their nests, and it's a real mess. But there's always going to be light at the end of the tunnel. But some of us have been waiting a long time in this. It's a long tunnel, I guess, but we see some lights. And besides, working with something like this, you have to realize we never get perfections in either the enemy. There are no perfect tyrants, and there are no perfect societies that never will infringe on any liberties of the people, and the people are left alone and they make all the decisions, they own their own life. But if the light in the tunnel leads us to a situation where there's more liberty and more prosperity and more peace, we should keep our eye on the ball, keep our eye on that light, and move in that direction. Today, I'd say we took a step in the right direction. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.